Gospel of John, chapter 5. If you didn't come into this place with the Bible this morning, you should be able to find one right there around you, underneath the chair in front of you, that you could look at the Word with us. What a privilege it is to be able to open up the Word of God and allow it to come in to our spirit, into our soul, and become a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. Let's just start the reading. I'm going to read straight through this story, and then we'll go back and kind of break it down. John chapter 5, starting at verse 1. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, which means house of mercy, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades, or 5 porches. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It's the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" And so they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. I love this story. There's a lot of curious things about this story that I want to talk with you about. First of all, let's go to verse 4. So go back to verse 4. What? Did you ever notice that? Okay, there is no verse 4. Now, for those of you that haven't bothered to grab a Bible, you might want to grab one now, because now I know your curiosity is piqued. Okay, are you in the King James Version? New King James. Okay, that explains it. Let me explain what is taking place here. You're going to actually have to go down to the bottom of your page to the footnotes, and you will find verse 4. Now let me explain what's happened here so that you don't get all nervous about the Bible. When the King James Version was transcribed into English, okay, they had certain manuscripts that they were using. Since that time, there have been other manuscripts that have been found that are much, much older, in fact, much closer to the original documents, including Dead Sea Scrolls and others like that. And when those older documents were found later, or closer to our time, they showed that there were certain things that were in the King James Version that didn't exist in the original documents. So what the modern translations have done is they have left out the things that weren't in the older texts. Okay, so let me try to explain that again. So these Dead Sea Scrolls, these documents that have been found that are older and more reliable as far as the original source, the original words, there are some things that are in the King James that aren't in those older documents. So, in other words, if you're reading out of New International Version or a modern translation like that, you're going to see that there's 49 verses that are omitted in the New International Version that you'll see in the King James Version, okay? There's 49 instances like that. Now, here's the thing. You'll find them in your footnotes, okay? So this is something that you could blow right past and you wouldn't even notice, but there is no verse 4 in here, and I wanted to make sure that you saw that and you understood why. Now, let's look at that. So go down to the footnotes, and if you're in the New King James Version, you'll see it in verse 4. But here's what it says. After the word paralyzed, so here's how verse 3 ends. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. And now we're at the footnotes. And they waited for the moving of the waters. From time to time, an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. The first one into the pool, after each such disturbance, would be cured of whatever disease he had. And then you're at verse 5. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. Okay, so here's the picture. Now, omitting that verse doesn't change the context at all, okay? But having it in there kind of helps you understand what the invalid is saying when Jesus asks him, do you want to get well? What was his response? Sir, I have no one to help me into the water when the water is stirred. That may have been something you're like, well, the water is stirred, helping you into the water. What are you talking about? See, here's the picture. At this pool, which is known as the House of Mercy, there is this stirring that takes place at whatever occasion. And because that verse is not in the older texts, or the ones that are closer to the original, what's in question is not that the water is being stirred, but is it really an angel stirring it? Or is it maybe God himself, the finger of God stirring that water? What we do know is this. That water gets stirred. And when that happens, the first person into the water is healed. So, because that is happening and they don't know when it's going to happen, these sick people, these lame, the paralyzed, they all gather to this pool every day, and they're watching that water. And when it's stirred, regardless of who is stirring it, an angel or God himself, when it gets stirred, the first one in there is healed, is cured. So here comes Jesus, all right? Jesus knows that this is happening, and he knows why all these people are gathered around. And you know, these porches are covered with these sick people, blind, lame, whatever it is. And he walks into this scene on this particular day. And he notices this one that is laying there, and he learns that this person has been sick, has been an invalid for over 38 years, paralyzed. So much so that he can't get himself into the water. So when Jesus says to him, do you want to get well? Do you want to be healed? His response is, out of his circumstances, yes, of course I do, Jesus. You know that I do. If I didn't want to be healed, I wouldn't even be here. I wouldn't have gone through the trouble of having someone carry me to this place. And no doubt it has to be someone getting him to that place. He can't even get himself into the water. So someone has carried him there, family, friends, whatever, and they probably have been doing that every single day for however many years that he has been coming to that pool. Yes, Jesus, I want to be healed. The problem is I don't have anybody to help me into the pool. So when it's stirred, there's always somebody that beats me in. It's just not fair. I find it really intriguing that he doesn't even know who he's talking to. He has no idea who Jesus is. He has no idea who this person is that's asking him, do you want to be healed? In fact, what's really curious is that there is zero faith applied in this story. Zero. Show me where there's faith. There's absolutely zero faith in who Jesus is at this point, and yet this person is delivered. Do you want to be well? Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool. Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. And he's healed instantly. Doesn't that pique your curiosity? Because isn't it our understanding that some level of faith, even if it's just the size of a mustard seed, there's got to be some level of faith applied for healing to take place. Yet in this story, in this circumstance, you can't find any. Certainly, this person has to have some level of faith in the event of the stirring of the waters. Otherwise, he wouldn't be there. But in regards to who Jesus is, understanding that Jesus is the living God of all the universe, the healer, and has come to bring that kind of deliverance, he doesn't even know who he's talking to, much less have any kind of understanding of the depth of who Jesus is. He doesn't even know his name. When the Jews ask him, who was it that told you could get up and carry your mat? He's like, no, I have no idea who it was. Because Jesus had slipped away. No chance of an introduction. It begs the question, why, Jesus? Why did you choose to heal this one? And by the way, why not everybody else there? Certainly there's lots of other people there that have no idea who you are and are there because they want to be healed as well, and probably would tell you the same story. I have no one to help me into the pool. Why just this one? Lots of curious things about this story. But as I was really wondering why Jesus would do this, I'm just going to assert what I believe is taking place here, why Jesus has done this. Because he's making an emphatic statement about him as the source of healing. That there is a new day that has come. And the stirring of the waters will take place no more. Let me tell you why I believe that. Go back to verse 2. And we're going to pay attention to how John writes this, okay? Now there is in Jerusalem, so he is talking in the present tense. And when he puts these words down, we're talking decades after the death and resurrection. When he writes this, when he's writing these words, but he's writing this in present tense. Now there is in Jerusalem. So the walls of Jerusalem are still up. The temple has not been destroyed yet, okay? Jesus has gone. The church has begun, but we're still in the place where Jerusalem is still intact, and he's saying, now there is currently in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Verse 3, here a great number of disabled people used to lie. Something has changed. The pool is still intact. The porches are still intact. But the people aren't laying there anymore. Why? The waters have stopped stirring. There's no reason for them to stay there anymore. It has to be what's happened. The waters have stopped stirring. Well, why would that happen? Why would this thing that has been in place for so long suddenly not be in place any longer? And I really believe from the bottom of my heart that that day when Jesus walked into that place, change happened. He made a declaration. No longer do these waters need to be stirred anymore. I am the source. I am the healer. In fact, he made this declaration in the chapter before to the Samaritan woman at the well. I have living water for you.